Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for coming here. You are sitting, actually, this is the first use of our Greenlight Hub right here in Ward 7. For those of you who are not familiar with our Greenlight Hubs, this is really the touch point for us as a company to a number of our driver partners. We want to have a place where if they need more help signing up to get on our platform, or they need more help in general, we want to be there for them. We want to be there physically. And it's also very important for us to have a local presence in the communities in which we serve, and to have a local presence in communities that historically have been underserved in terms of transportation. This Greenlight Hub is going to open up in a month or two, and we're proud to be here in Ward 7, and it's great to have you here as well. So I wanted to start talking about cities and our partnership with cities in general. Uber has grown up with the cities of the world, and we have helped revolutionize urban transportation and urban mobility, and we've grown up in the cities in which we have operated. Around half of the world's population now live in cities, in urban destinations, and that percentage is only going to increase. The statistics or the predictions are that up to 2/3 of the world's population is going to be living in cities. That's a great thing for Uber to be partnering with the cities and to have that kind of growth ahead of us. At the same time, it comes with real challenges. How do you invest in and build up infrastructure ahead of this growth so that you're not behind this growth? How do you deal with the issues of congestion? How do you deal with the environmental issues of cars on the road, et cetera? And how do you make sure that mobility, transportation is available to everybody in cities, not just in the center of cities, but also in the outskirts and the areas that have been traditionally underserved? We want to be a part of that solution with cities. And today, what we want to talk to you about are some of the investments that we have made to be part of the solution and to partner with cities in moving forward in a world where 50% of the population is going to be cities, going up to 2/3. So we're super excited to talk about some of those issues. One of the core issues that we face and one of the core solution sets that we have to come up with is we have to solve the issue of car ownership. There are over 1.2 billion cars in the world today, and that number is projected to increase. And cars as an asset class, everyone wants to own a car in the United States. It's part of our kind of the American dream. But as an asset class, cars are very inefficient. 95% of the time, cars sit idle. If my car, which I'm giving up when I moved to San Francisco, had a personality, it will be really excited when I ride the car. It's like, yay, he's coming to ride me. Like most of the time, these cars are very, very underutilized. And when they are utilized, typically they have one driver in them. And as we think about the solution for urban mobility and where we take cities going forward, we have to have a solution for car ownership, and we have to work together to make sure that living in a city, living in an urban destination doesn't require you to own a car. So if you think about Uber's evolution as a company, we started as kind of a high-end car service. We went to UberX for more affordable transportation that's available to everybody everywhere, essentially. And we have made very, very substantial investments in Uber Pool and Pool Express. The idea that 2 or 3 people can get into a car and share that car, one, so that it's more affordable, and 2, so that you're taking cars off the road, you're reducing congestion, you're reducing kind of the environmental costs that come with car ownership as well. So we've certainly made investments along that path. Today is the day when we talk about even moving further along that road and solving car ownership, which we believe is a real worldwide problem. So today we're announcing a number of initiatives going forward, which we think are going to be part of the solution in partnership with the cities in which we operate. The first is an announcement that we announced earlier this week, which is the acquisition of Jump. Jump bicycles, this is one of the bikes. This is, Jump was one of the very, very early players in bicycle sharing, and Jump has built what we believe is the best e-bike out there. What an e-bike does is it's actually pedal assisted. You ride a bike, you feel like Superman when you're riding these bikes. It's pretty awesome. And we think that increasing bike sharing, and in particular, having e-bikes available on a dockless basis in cities in a responsible way is going to allow more and more people to move around in cities, but move around in cities in ways that are efficient, that don't cause traffic, that don't cause issues with environment. So we're really excited to announce the acquisition of Jump. You'll hear more about it, and also integrating Jump into the Uber app. More and more Uber is not just going to be about taking a car, but is going to be about moving from point A to B in the best way that you can get from point A to B, so that it's affordable, so that it's responsible, and so that it's in partnership with where cities have to go in the future. Second announcement for us is a partnership with Masabi, which is an app that allows Uber to integrate in with public transport, so that you can actually use your Uber app to take a train, to take a subway, to take buses, etc., again on a global basis, so that we are promoting mass transit solutions as well. You'll hear more about that. Third for us is promoting car sharing actively with Uber Rent. This is a partnership that is launching with GetAround, so that you can use your Uber app if you need a car and you want to drive yourself for an hour or a day, etc. So again, we're promoting that active car sharing. And then last and certainly not least, we are actively starting to share more data on an aggregated basis as it relates to traffic and as it relates to curbside solutions, so that we can help cities solve their congestion and traffic problems in partnership together. Woohoo, absolutely. So whether you're taking morning commute by mass transit, or you're taking an e-bike to an important meeting during the day, or you're taking a ride home with an express pool, or on a weekend you want to go to the beach, and you need a car for that day, we want Uber to be there with you, and we want Uber to partner with cities to be part of our solution going forward. So with that, I'm going to introduce you to the team who's really going to do this instead of just talking about it. First is Ryan Chappelle Ski, who is the founder of Jump, and he has been at this. He looks really young, but he's been at this actually for a long time, and he's going to tell you a little bit about the Jump story and what we have planned for Jump going forward. So thank you very much. Please welcome Ryan.
Thank you so much, Dara. We were really excited to make the announcement this week and to formally join the Uber team. Our goal has been to get people on bikes, as many people on bikes as possible, and we see this as a way of doing that on a truly global scale. There's no company that has the type of reach that Uber has, the type of on-the-ground operations presence in cities all over the world. And so if the goal is shifting mode and getting people out of owning their own cars and onto other modes of transportation, there's really no better place for us to have landed. I have a background in urban planning, and I worked for the New York City Department of Transportation in the bike planning group, which designs bike lanes and bike racks. So I actually approached this very much from the lens of the city. And so to hear Dara on stage talking about how Uber is going to partner with cities going forward, and how data sharing, multimodal, all of these things are very true to the spirit of our company and our founding vision. We've actually deployed more than 40 projects in 6 countries around the world, always in deep partnership with cities, and we plan to continue to do that, and for each market we launch, do so the right way with the proper permits and with the participation of cities themselves. A bit about the product. When I first, we started and grew with the regular pedal bikes, and when I first tried the electric bike last summer when we launched in San Francisco, I turned to our lead designer. I said, "Oh my God, you've done it. You've made the bicycle obsolete." And I truly feel that way. So if our goal is actually bikes as transportation and bikes as utility, there's nothing better than a shared electric dockless bike where you can go from point to point in a city. You can go everywhere you need to go, and you do it with minimal effort. You're still active. It's still active transportation. You're moving your body, but it takes the pain out of cycling and leaves all the joy. So this product represents almost a decade of work in the space. It's something that it senses how hard you're working. There's a torque sensor on it. It senses how hard you're working and gives you a natural boost to go longer distances, to go up hills, and to get where you're going without breaking a sweat. Dressed in a suit, just however you like, getting to exactly where you need to go without breaking a sweat. So we're very excited to be part of Uber. We're very excited to take this vision and this company from where we are today to every major city around the world and be part of a multimodal platform that includes car share, public transit, biking, and yes, shared rides. So with that, I'll turn to Jahan, who could talk a little bit about the other things that Dara mentioned today.
Good job. Hey everyone, I'm Jahan. I'm the head of product for mobility at Uber. So first of all, thank you, Ryan. I'm enormously excited for Jump to be joining the Uber family. But before I get into that, I'm going to do the thing I usually do about e-bikes. How many of you have ridden this? Oh, it looks like a lot of people. I think there's some Uber employees over there, but like, yeah. So the first time I rode this thing, I'll tell you exactly what my mindset was, which is, yeah, I understand bikes, not that interesting, whatever. And then I got on the thing, and it just blew me away. I really think this is going to be one of the most relevant transportation products in the last several years. So I really encourage all of you to just try it, and then it's a highly biased opinion, but I think you'll like it. So Megan and I are going to talk about a bunch of new product launches today, and they may seem disparate, but there's two common threads to all of it. The first is we are starting a strategy where we are going to double down on Uber becoming more than just a ride-sharing company. Jump is an excellent example, and you're going to continue to see more and more things like that. Our view is we are going to be the predominant point A to point B transportation platform in the world. And the second point that I think is extremely important for us to have realized, and I'm glad we have, is in order for us to be successful in doing this, we can only do it in a spirit of true partnership with cities, in a spirit of true partnership with transit agencies, and this kind of thing. We need to set up an environment where when cities win, we win. When transit agencies win, we win, and vice versa. So hopefully what you see here is a demonstration of some commitment to that strategy. So with that, the first thing I want to talk about is, again, still on the topic of Jump, but we are starting today expanding Uber Bike by Jump into Washington, D.C. The rollout starts today. We piloted this product in San Francisco. I think our subsequent actions have demonstrated how highly we think of its potential. So Jump will be available in the Uber app to all users, and we will be scaling up to 400 bikes in the next few weeks. So for those of you that haven't seen the experience on the Uber app, I want to walk you through it quickly. So the way it works is to use Uber Bike, you simply select the bike option on the side menu of your Uber app. From there, you'll see all available Jump bikes near you. You can choose the one you want. You pick the closest one or the one that's most convenient to you. You can pay through the Uber app, ride it however long you want. The price is $2 for the first 30 minutes and $1 per 15 minutes after that. And lock it to a bike rack when you're done. It's very simple. The second product launch I want to talk about is our car sharing product. So this month we are launching Uber Rent, which is our first attempt to allow people to drive themselves by the hour. This is a program powered by GetAround. It's launching this month in San Francisco, and once we feel solid about the product market fit, we'll be expanding nationally. So for those of you who don't know, GetAround is a peer-to-peer car sharing service. And this is an interesting business model. What this means is anyone who owns a car that doesn't that wants to make money off of it passively because it's sitting all the time can upload it onto GetAround, and other people who want to rent it by the hour can do so and drive it around and then return it. So starting this month, we will be integrating GetAround into the Uber app in a manner similar to Jump, and we'll be scaling up their fleet of cars in San Francisco. So the reason we think this is important is the way we envision this product being used is, people who need to get groceries around town, take a weekend getaway, pick up relatives, this kind of thing. All of these cases may seem exceptional, but the way we view them is these exceptional cases are what keep people buying a car, because in the back of their mind, that's the only way they feel comfortable living in a city. And what we're hoping to do is provide a really compelling alternative to those exceptional cases when it's paired with Uber, and when it's paired with Jump, and when it's paired with the transit options in the city. You actually start to feel like, yeah, I really don't need to own this car. So with that, here's an illustration of how it works. It's very similar to Uber Bike. You simply select Rent a Car from your side menu. From there, search for the car you want, the type of car you want, the location of the car you want. Click on it, reserve it for the length of time you want. And from there, you can lock and unlock it with your phone. You can drive it around, and when you're done, simply return it. Okay, my final announcement is in a very early stage, but it's important enough that I wanted to call it out here. So we've signed a deal with Masabi, who is the leader in mass transit mobile ticketing, and they are partnered with 35 of the largest transit agencies in the world, including the MBTA in Boston and the MTA in New York. And what this represents is the beginning of a sustained investment on behalf of Uber into making mass transit and public transit real first-class citizens in the Uber ecosystem. So, again, this is very early. This is roughly what we're imagining. Our next step is to talk with Masabi and their partner agencies about who to pilot with first. But what we're trying to build towards is a future where not only will Uber riders be able to see transit routes, see transit information, but you'll also be able to use the Uber app as a ticket onto these transit agencies themselves, and you'll be able to pay for these services via your Uber account. So hopefully in the future, no matter where you are in the world, if you have the Uber app, you have immediate access to all the transit information and all the transit systems that power every city in the world. So to summarize, as you can see, we're on the beginning of a very exciting journey, in my opinion. We're investing in bike sharing, we're investing in car sharing, and we're starting to invest in transit. And I sincerely hope that this represents the beginning of us growing into something much more ambitious as a company. And we're super excited to get these products off the ground. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Megan Joyce, our Regional General Manager for US and Canada, to talk about data sharing.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today, and thanks, Jahan, for talking us through those exciting launches. I'm here to talk about what we're going to do for cities, because while it's incredibly exciting and powerful for consumers to offer multiple different types of transportation in a single app, we know that there's more we can do to serve the cities in which we operate. And in order to do that, we need to give back to the cities and public agencies that govern these communities in which we operate. And we know we're able to do that through a couple means: our technology and our data. And that's why earlier this year, we launched a first-of-its-kind partnership with the city of Cincinnati called the Cincinnati Mobility Lab. And the purpose of this is to partner with Cincinnati and its leaders on a number of different mobility challenges, including curbside issues, commuting challenges, and even designing a transit system of the future that leverages existing infrastructure with new technologies to create a totally integrated system that allows the people of Cincinnati to move around the metro area totally seamlessly. We're really excited to learn from this pilot with the city of Cincinnati to understand how we can both improve that community and also learn how to partner better with other cities around the world. As Dara mentioned, this is a huge priority of ours, and we're excited to learn from this early step. And in that vein, I have two new announcements that we're excited to share today. The first has to do with Uber Movement. So many of you might have heard about Uber Movement. It's a website that launched last year that shows aggregated and anonymized data around travel conditions over various days and months to show how that might change over different hours or times of day, or during special events, or during certain times of road closures, so that city planners and local leaders and civic organizations can better serve their city, armed with this data. Well, Movement is our early step to help empower these leaders going forward. And today, we're announcing that we are expanding Movement to 12 new cities across 5 continents. This is the largest expansion of Movement that we've had to date. Our new cities are Amsterdam, Bangalore, Brisbane, Cairo, Hyderabad, Melbourne, Mumbai, Nairobi, New Delhi, Perth, Pittsburgh, and Toronto. Cities all around the world that we are now partnering with to provide this data to urban planners and leaders. This brings our total number of Uber Movement cities to 21. And we're very excited to help urban planners in even more cities tackle the increasing numbers of mobility challenges that they're seeing every day through this system. The second announcement has to do with curbside challenges. This is an increasing issue for cities around the world. We share cities' goals of enabling riders and drivers to come together in safer, faster, more easy ways, especially staying out of the way of regular traffic that's trying to get to and from where they need to go. To help cities understand what's happening on their streets and ensure that these new shared modes of transportation are able to operate in the city even more seamlessly, the team that brought you Uber Movement is now partnering with the organization Shared Streets to pioneer a new kind of public-private partnership to offer this data to cities, and to do so in a way that respects rider and driver data privacy and the competitive landscape of all the different players that are operating in this ecosystem. We know that successful collaboration with cities requires an open, non-proprietary data standards and replicable models that all different types of transportation, from ride sharing to taxis and more, that we can all access together. And we're incredibly excited to collaborate with Shared Streets on this project. Here on this screen is a preview of what the Shared Streets dashboard is going to look like. On this screen, you can see Uber and taxi data brought together, aggregated and combined to show pickups and drop-offs on a recent Saturday and Sunday in a certain area of DC. As part of a pilot that we're actually starting here in DC, we're going to be working with Shared Streets along with the District Department of Transportation and the Department of Vehicles for Hire to put together a pilot to bring together data from all different modes of transportation, ride-sharing, taxis, and otherwise, so that the district can actually leverage this data to better do curbside planning and ensure that everyone who needs to use the street is doing so in a safe, responsible, and easy way. We know that better curbside utilization is critical for a future in which we're all relying on shared modes of transportation more than we are our own personal vehicles. And so this partnership will be essential as we and cities work together to learn how to share this data in a way that works for all of us. And this is just the start. We look forward to building on what we learned from this pilot with Shared Streets here in DC to understand how we can use these shared streets data standards to work with cities around the world on this challenging issue. As we think about where we want cities to go in the future and individual car ownership to go in the future, we know there's more we can do, and we will. Technology and data alone are not solutions for all of the myriad of mobility challenges that cities and communities face, but when done right and in partnership with the other players in the ecosystem, they have the potential to contribute to better cities for everyone. We are really excited to move forward with cities, and we appreciate all of you coming here today to talk with us about how we might make that happen. So now I'm going to clear the stage, and we're going to have a great panel discussion about these very topics. Thank you very much.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Great. My name is Rob Puentes. I'm the president and CEO of the ENO Center for Transportation. We're a public policy think tank here in beautiful Washington, D.C. I want to welcome you all to this great event and to this great panel. It's actually great to be here in Washington and not be dealing with federal Washington.
Yes. Thank you.
Especially at the ENO Center. We do a lot of work with federal Washington, and despite all of the attention to what's going on here and the Trump infrastructure plan and all the hand-wringing that nothing is getting done, it's wonderful to be out in the real Washington and actually see and hear from folks who are actually doing things and actually solving problems and getting things done in real exciting ways.
I like that.
Well, this is where all the action is. You can't work in transportation and urban stuff now and not be dealing with the cities where all the action is, because we see in city after city new partnerships that are starting to emerge between local governments and private organizations and private firms. We see tons and tons of innovation, pilots, experiments, new kinds of ideas that are proliferating all around the country, and an insatiable demand for cities and metropolitan areas and states in some cases, but especially cities, to learn from one another. That's the one question that they ask us at ENO is, who's doing what? How can we learn what they've done? What didn't work there? How can we take that and tailor it to our new place? So it's really great to be here to moderate this session with these folks up here. Because the conversation is not just transportation for transportation's sake. There are plenty of those transportation conversations happening all over the place. This is a conversation about transportation and what it means for people and what it means for places. And there's arguably no place that is doing more in this space, I think, right now than the District of Columbia. We work very closely with both Uber and with the district government on a range of different things, and so I'm really honored to be moderating this esteemed panel here today. So we're honored to have the District of Columbia Mayor Muriel Bowser. She is the district's 8th mayor. She's the district's 8th mayor, taking office in 2015. We're also honored down at the end to have former mayor of Indianapolis and the deputy mayor of New York, of Indianapolis. Did I say that? Yeah. Indianapolis. Stephen Goldsmith. He is the Daniel Paul Professor of the Practice of Government and the director of the Innovations in American Government program at Harvard's Kennedy Center School for Government. And obviously, Dara Khorashari from Uber. So I'm going to start off with one big, broad question for the entire panel. Then we're going to get into a bunch of different conversations here. We heard this morning about a lot of different innovations and things that are happening at Uber, which is really fantastic, particularly focusing on these partnerships that are emerging between the public and the private sector. It's stimulating all kinds of innovation. But cities and private companies have different motivations. They have different things, different goals, different objectives, and they're kind of governed by a different set of principles sometimes. So where are those areas of overlap? Where are those sweet spots where the interests of the public sector and the city government and the interests of the private sector overlap? I think we heard a lot about those this morning, but I'm interested to hear what folks have to say. We'll start with you, Ms. Mayor.
Well, sure. I think our big interest is how we move people, and we move people around our city in a way that's safe, in a way that's affordable, and in a way that's equitable. And I think when we saw ride-sharing services come to our city, we were also trying to address some problems. And some of the problems were all parts of the city had different access to transportation. And we knew that more options would deliver more options for transportation for all DC residents. So I think that's been a significant overlap. How can technology help us fix disparaging access to disparate access to transportation.
It really is about accessibility.
Accessibility.
Right? No mobility.
I think the three words that the mayor said, safe, affordable, and equitable, run in Uber's DNA. For us as a company, actually safety, making sure that we are the safest transportation platform on earth is incredibly important. We're making very substantial investments on the safety front. Identity is a big part of that, knowing your driver as the driver, knowing who you are, and we're really taking it to the next step, and we've got lots of exciting things to talk about there. Affordability, right? It's the ability for you to be mobile. Mobility for us mobility represents freedom. Mobility represents opportunity. And making mobility available to everyone, everywhere, whether you're in the center of a city or a traditionally underserved area, is incredibly important to us. You're having access to transportation, if you can't afford to buy a car, is part of what we do. So I think as a company, our understanding that you can't skim off the top. If you're going to be a true partner for the city, you have to serve the whole city, and there are some parts that are going to be tougher to serve and maybe more expensive, et cetera. But it's our responsibility that if we're a partner to the city, we want to be available to everybody. That goes to the equitable, both affordable and equitable as well. So I think that a lot of what we're trying to build in partnership with cities, requires us to have a long-term view of the world. And I think Uber is one of these companies that can afford to think long-term. We're not trying to solve for the quarter. We're not trying to solve for the year. We're trying to solve for where we're going to be 10 years from now. And I think if you take this true long-term view, then you can really have a partnership, because in every partnership, you're going to have a give and take. You're going to have disagreements, but you know that you're stuck with each other. And if you're stuck with each other, then you compromise. And I think if you bring that kind of a view, I think you can have the proper private-public partnership, knowing that you're not going to agree on every single issue, but knowing that you're going to be together for a long time.
And that's a true partnership.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Of course, I agree with both answers. Let me make it a little more difficult, though, in the following sense, right? So I've been at these transit wars for, unfortunately, 25 years, fighting with the taxi cartels and then the regulation when I was in D.C. In New York as well.
He said it, I didn't.
Well, but the point is that there are natural areas of overlap, and they're not, right? And cities, D.C. is an exception, of course, have started out with, in their efforts are to regulate and protect a mode of transit. Historically, we're going to protect the taxi drivers, we're going to protect the buses, and they get into managing that protection as contrasted to an orientation towards the customer, right? So the area where all of us up here agree is as expressed by the last two comments, which is in behalf of the customer, right? So sharing data and sharing information, and as in the early days, I think of kind of Uber participation with the cities, the cities were trying to regulate to protect their existing modes of transit, and Uber was naturally protective, right? And so you got off to kind of a bad start. So I think now that you step back and say, where do we agree? Well, we agree that there are underserved communities. There's access for folks who need transportation. As the mayor says, we need mobility in an equitable way, right? And so if we concentrate on that and the cities concentrate on getting the data they need to make that work, then I think we can all get along a lot better.
That's great. And I wanted to rely on this piece about the underserved communities. That is kind of a big part of the conversation. How do we make sure, and Tori, you talked a lot about this, but how do we really make sure that no one is being left behind? How do we make sure that it is as equitable as possible, that we are providing access across the entire the region, the places that need it? Let me start with you, Ms. Mayor, if you don't mind.
Well, it's something that we have to watch carefully. It's part of what the data sharing between companies like Uber and the city will help us better manage. But it's also important, especially when you talk about transportation, to have a fulsome kind of view of what equity is. Because we have parts of our city, sometimes we're talking about underserved areas, and transportation, that could mean areas that are highly affluent and less dense, that have no public transportation services. And it can mean areas that are very dense, that are geographically challenged to getting vehicles and service from the downtown inside. And it can mean for communities that are less affluent and have less of their disposable income to pay on transportation options. So we have been very focused on that whole spectrum when we talk about our transportation system. So we are, and it's interesting the way the mayor talks about protecting one mode of transportation. I think we went in D.C. into this discussion that we want to protect choice. We want our residents to have the most choices possible. That means a highly functioning metro system, both the heavy rail and the bus. That means in some cases our own bus system, the DC circulator, to go in areas where Metro has said that it's more difficult for them to operate. That has also meant that we're operating one of the best bicycle share programs anywhere in the United States with our Capital Bike Share. That's meant we've been out on the cutting edge and other things, like we're still on the cutting edge with dockless bikes, but we're getting there to make that work too. So we have, and that's why the amount, the number and percentage and share of people in DC that are not in single occupant vehicles is so high. And so we know that we have continued work to do that. And that data is helping us. And one thing that our DDOT has come up with that data is helping us figure out is also how we can make the ride-sharing services more efficient. How many people have seen people standing in all different kinds of spaces and cars pulling over to get in the car and there's a traffic jam behind them? So now we want to work with companies to see how we can better manage that drop-off and pickup so that we're moving people around the city better.
And the data is helping you determine areas where we need to improve accessibility.
It absolutely can.
I totally agree with the mayor that the data doesn't lie, and I think data will tell you what areas are underserved and what areas need work. I think that sometimes companies getting into some of these areas can be surprised. So for us, for example, this area, Ward 7, one of the coolest surprises for us has actually been our Eats business. You'll see some Eats bags over here, which is a delivery business. And prior to our coming into this market and this area, there was very little delivery, actually restaurant delivery available in this area. And because of this kind of this construct that we start with, which is we want to be available to everyone everywhere, we launched Eats. We already had a ride-sharing business, and we launched Eats in this area. And it has been an absolute wonderful surprise and dynamite in this area. Like, when you build a service that's affordable, that's available, that's incredibly easy to use, consumers use it, and I think that there are consumers everywhere in these cities. So I don't think that there's necessarily, I think that this idea, classic idea that companies only want to skim off the top, et cetera, I think to some extent the world is changing, and I think because Uber is, we can be such a part of the city's fabric, I think that we can be a stronger partner than what you've associated in the past. And by the way, it can be great for business. You know, our Eats business here is doing very, very well.
I was just going to add one thing to what Dara said that I found surprising, and that there are probably people just like me who have parents who are aging, and I was incredibly surprised that my 80-plus-year-old parents are so willing to adopt technology, and them adopting that technology will allow them to age in their homes longer and longer. So my mom will go down to Arena Stage using ride sharing, or be able to have deliveries to their home using delivery services like you just mentioned, and other delivery services as well. So I think that there are things that in an urban environment like ours that mayors think about. How can I have more of my seniors be able to stay in their homes and not have a bus that comes to their front door? Yeah. These are things that we're trying to figure out. We have other transportation needs in cities, like getting people to the hospital. And sometimes what we found is that they're using ambulances when actually they just need a ride. And so how can we work with all of our transportation options, taxi cabs included, to get those things done?
So you're sending a very strong message that you're seeing all of this that's going on as complementary to existing transportation systems, when the narrative nationally is that there is a bit of competition. If folks are concerned, they look around the country and say, well, we have transit declines, ridership declines all over the place. And I think 5 of the top 50 metros don't have transit declines. So it's happening everywhere. But what I'm hearing from you and from the panel is that this is really thought to be complementary as a holistic package of transportation. Do you see that around the country,
well,
Steve? Because you work
so we're in a transition period, right? So some cities it's not complementary, some cities it is complementary. I mean, D.C. is particularly sophisticated with respect to its use of data and its transportation options. But if we just step back, historically, cities, nobody really manages transit, mobility in a city, right? Somebody manages the transit department and the bike department and the taxi. So if we step back and look at how they can be complementary, kind of as the mayor suggested, what's the role of the city? Well, the city has regulatory authority and it has some money, right? The money sometimes goes into, not too much money, but some money, right? So sometimes the money goes into transit and sometimes the money goes in elsewhere. And if we want to address the questions of equity, we kind of look at what the current transit system looks like, and we figure out how we can increase the choices, particularly the underserved, whether they're elderly or whether they're poor, right? How do we get them to work? How do we complement those networks? Some cities offer vouchers for use for Uber for first and last mile where the transit doesn't work. So if the city takes the position, look, we're not trying to be a monopolist. We're trying to organize the market in a way that's efficient. We can dramatically improve the ability of folks to get to work or to get to where they need to through kind of integrating these services.
Other than the District of Columbia, are those other places that stand out to you that are really starting to crack that code a little bit better than others?
Well, there's different ways, right? San Francisco is very sophisticated in the use of data. As we know, St. Petersburg has used vouchers, right, to help folks get access to shared rides and pooled rides for the first and last mile. There's places like Boston that are using shared rides in lieu as I can't remember which one of you mentioned, in lieu of kind of using ambulances as a means of transportation for when it's not urgent. So there are examples everywhere. I think that before we got on, the speaker mentioned that the Cincinnati sharing may be like a very big step to the future, which will allow much broader use of these programs than currently exists.
Mm-hmm. On the health side, actually, we've just introduced the product Uber Health, which creates an environment that's HIPAA compliant. It is totally anonymized so that you don't know if a particular person is going to a hospital, et cetera, because that's private information. And it's been a product that we've invested in for a long time. It's a recent launch, but that's another example of a private enterprise building a product for public / private use that I think can be beneficial in both ways. It will undoubtedly be cheaper. It'll be more convenient. It'll be available on a broader basis, and it will give the medical provider and the patients the kind of privacy that they should demand, and we think it can be a terrific solution.
And that's not something you need regulatory reform or you need special kind of dispensation. You can just do that as a private.
Well, you have to make sure that your solution is HIPAA compliant, et cetera, so that it matches the regulatory frameworks that the hospitals and your clients want to operate in. But we're not doing it because of regulation. But you have to, regulation is important in this world. You're seeing that more and more. And for private companies to understand and to have a real dialogue about where regulation is going and then building products that can fit into that regulation in a constructive way, I think it's super important going forward.
So if you drive down the cost and increase the efficiency. Transportation costs for services to the disabled, right? And there are ways that you can dramatically improve both convenience and speed and reduce costs. Then there's a possibility, right, that you could use some of those resources to help folks who are not disabled but are economically disadvantaged, right? So what's the role in using the freed up dollars, and how do we think about the way that integrates with the transit system? I think there's great opportunities once we get past this kind of transitional period where we're not quite sure what the future looks like.
And you keep saying you said that a couple of times. I think it is we are in this transitional period where there are so many pilots, so many things that are going on, and there really is this period of experimentation. It's really exciting. But as a transportation person, obviously we're here in the city. We move all around the city, but it's part of a region, right? And so most people work in one community, live in another, and they kind of do. So how do you reach out, especially in this region, which is arguably the most complex governance structure of any place in the nation? How do you make this a regional conversation so it branches outside of just the boundaries of this? Unfair question.
Well, we are on the brink of solving a regional question that's been 45 years in the making and wanting for a solution. So if we can solve the dedicated metro funding solution, I dare say we can solve everything else. And we are on the brink of getting there. And it is important to note that in a region like ours, we're 700,000 in D.C. We haven't been this large in about 40 years, and we're growing at about 800 people a month. This region is also growing at a similar clip, about 4 or 5 million person region. And people just want to live here. It's like DC's hot, right? It's a hot location, hot for millennials. Tech companies want to be here. I mean, people want to be in DC. But our growth can be significantly limited by gridlock. And so having a functioning metro system, a public transportation system, is among our top priorities. And so the heavy rail is one part of it. What our DDOT team and Metro are doing with buses are huge. But all of our options being able to work together is important.
That's great. And there was a report that came out recently from the Brookings Institution that looked at the digitization of the American workforce. And they found that the District of Columbia, as a state, had by far the highest score, higher than the San Jose metro area. So, Daryl, when you look for partners, when you look at what cities you're going to work with, do you look at things like that? But how ready is the workforce for these new tech innovations, for lack of a better term?
Listen, I think it varies by region, but there are always leaders in every region and around the country, such as DC. And what we want to do is find those leaders, run pilot programs with them, hopefully demonstrate shared success, and then expand from there. The cool thing about Uber is we started as a local business. You know, we're a big tech company, we're quite digital, but we exist at this collision of the digital and the physical. You know, you push a button and a car shows up, push a button and food shows up. So the business grew up very, very locally, and there's a deep presence that we have in every city that we operate in. We've got local teams here. DC is a big regional team that we have here, and I just think that there are certain cities like DC that are forward thinking, and if you think about the revolution in shared transport, on demand, right? Data being used to serve the customer better, de-averaging, right? So if you're not, you need to de-average your solution so that, for example, you can offer higher prices to drivers who want to drive during rush hour, so that you have more cars on the road, and during rush hour you have more availability. You want to offer pool, etc. This ability to actually solve not for the average, but solve for real-time demand is a huge revolution that has made, car sharing a much, much better product. We think we can use those same ideas, data, on-demand, de-averaging, and we can bring those skill sets to public transport in partnership, and that's what today's announcement that we have is all about. And I think that if we give more information to the user, if we make it incredibly easy to transact, if they know when the bus is going to show up or when the metro is going to show up, we think that's going to drive use, and ultimately that's going to make it even better to live in a city like this. It's going to be even cooler, and that'll be good for us too, and we can have a win-win.
And a lot of that, I think, is leadership at the top, and clearly you've set a frame for the district being very innovative and open to these kinds of partnerships. But Steve, I have a question for you, and it's the term that just preoccupies me. It's all about procurement reform. It's the kind of thing that puts people to sleep, but it's profoundly important. about how cities and private sector and private companies work together. And you can have leadership at the top, but if you have rules that aren't accommodating, nothing gets done. Are you seeing places that are starting to look at those rules, maybe relaxing a little bit, maybe do new kind of pilots? Who's starting to work with these partnerships better?
Well, you could think about procurement in many different ways. What you need to find is a community that has established a mobility manager over all modes of transportation, right? And DC is more complex than anywhere else, but almost everywhere has a kind of a regional transportation network. But you've got multiple cities, right? You have multiple sets of regulation. You have some still using the regulatory framework to kind of produce barriers to entry as contrasted to increase access. So I think where we see it best are in places that are trying to manage mobility broadly. Now, the other problem with procurement, since you began the meeting with beating up on the federal government, is historically, the federal government, I'm not defending them, that's not where I'm going with this. Historically, the federal government has funded with a set of very heavy rules and regulations on what transit agencies can spend money on the size of the buses, on how quickly they replace the buses, on a whole set of, and that continues through the highway funding dollars as well. And so now we have a conversation like today that says, well, this is all about how we manage our curbside. It's not how we manage our parking. It's not how we manage our Uber. It's not how we manage our bikes. It's how we manage our curbside. So the issue of regulation and procurement, all of those rules are obsolete, right, in today's shared economy, and they do need to move very quickly to change.
Mm-hmm. So, and I think it is right. It's the federal. We see a lot of states that are actually, and cities, eschewing some of the federal money because the rules are so burdensome and bureaucratic
and inflexible. Right.
One more question I had for you, Ms. Merritt. So the district is clearly a leader when it comes to sustainability and environmental sustainability. You've talked about this quite a bit. Is there anything about the transportation tech revolution that worries you about environmental sustainability? Are there things that are incompatible, especially we're talking about vehicles. We're talking about cars driving around. We've done a lot in these cities to reduce the amount of driving and getting people out of their cars. Is there anything that bothers you about this or anything we need to
Well, we do need to be mindful that we want more people in more vehicles. Like, so if we can get 3 people in a car, that's better than 1 person in a car. If it's better for that person to be on a bus where there are 80 people, that's great too. And we want people to be able to take transit, so we want safe and reliable transit as well. And we see that show up. We've done a lot of work in getting people out of single occupant vehicles. We have a very high ride share in the city where people are on transit, they're walking, they're biking, or they're not in a single occupant vehicle. So we're proud of that work. But we see with the growth that we need to do a lot more. We're not growing any roads in D.C., so we have to better manage the number of people who are in single occupant vehicles. So we see that. But I think that the companies can work on that too. How can they incentivize people to share rides, to do more, have more people in the vehicles, and that's something we would be looking forward to.
So this is part of that solution if those rides are more shared. There's more than 2 people in the vehicle, basically.
Absolutely. So when we looked, for example, when there was major work being done on lines on our metro system, and I asked my team to come up with ways that we can help our riders who may be off of metro or doing other things. So we added bus service. We looked for ways to help people who are ride sharing have closer in parking and drop-offs and things like that. So we recognize that they could be a part of the solution, but not if we're just adding more vehicles. And so we had to be smart about the incentives that we offer as a city and the price incentives that the company offers.
I think
this is unfamiliar to you.
Yeah, listen, the shared vehicles and shared ride area is an area that can truly scale. This is to the extent that you can get 2 people in a car, 3 people in a car, you can get a lot of cars off the road, which is incredibly important for the future of cities and transportation in general. what we're finding is we're investing hundreds of millions of dollars a year in our Express and Express Pool product. And what we're finding is that there are these societal norms that we have to battle. People are used to, you go in a metro, it's a shared ride, you're going to be with a bunch of other people, it doesn't feel weird. You go on a bus, doesn't feel weird. You share a car with someone else, and it kind of feels a little weird. Are you supposed to talk to them? What do you say? Can you do work? Can you talk on your phone, et cetera? So we are having to discount very aggressively, much more so than you would think, shared ride and express pool rides to get people to want to try this new mode of transportation that we think should be a much, much bigger mode of transportation. And the more people share, the more powerful it becomes, the economics become more powerful, et cetera. And the combination of the societal norms and then the question of when exactly am I going to get there are real friction points that we have had to fight. And that's why we are investing very heavily in this mode of transport. And we're seeing incredibly encouraging results in certain cities. In San Francisco, our headquarters, almost 50% of our rides during rush hour are shared. So it can happen, but it requires sustained investment. It requires big investment. And it's something that we're very much behind. And as we think about kind of transit funding rules, et cetera, the watch out is you don't want to be taxing one kind of form of shared mobility to help another, because all of it is a pool that is working for the good. And believe me, as a company, we're all in on this thing.
What is that massive investment that you
mentioned? The massive investment is price cuts, right? So in order to get, in order on, if you look at Uber Pool and Uber Pool Express, I encourage all of you to try it. It's ridiculously cheap. And it's ridiculously cheap because we're investing in it. But listen, every early product that you're investing in, you have to invest in to build mass utilization and to build liquidity. We're in the mass utilization liquidity mode. We're investing, and we're totally committed to it.
Now, I know we want to take the last 10 minutes here for some questions from the press. I don't know exactly, can't see quite where we are with this. Hang on one second. I think we were going to, they had some moderated questions here.
I'm a loud talker, no big deal. You guys talked so much today about safety, about regulation. So my question is about recalls. Does Uber have any idea how many drivers are driving for Uber, even cars with an open recall? And then, Mayor Bowser, would you support a rule that says you can't operate a for-hire vehicle if you have an open recall?
The question on Uber for recalls, I honestly don't know. It's a great point, and it's something that we will look into. I know that my plate tag in my car in Washington that I had signed up for Uber expired, and Uber let me know about that expiration, and I needed to go to a Greenlight Hub to get it going. So we are constantly looking at your registration, et cetera. We're moving forward like with background checks and actually trying to move to real-time background checks, et cetera. I think from a recall standpoint, it's a great point, and if it's not something we do today, it's something that we will do going forward. I think it's a great point.
And yes, we would expect that the vehicles have valid registration and are safe for the roadway. So I would have to look at what we have in place. And I want to just say one more thing to what Dara pointed out. We're sitting in Ward 7 at the Greenlight Hub, and I know you located here because so many of the drivers live in close proximity to where we are. And I think when we were all here some months ago to announce the opening of this location, we really spent some time thinking about why DC residents were choosing to really start their little small business driving for Uber and others. And so we've gotten some feedback from them about the flexibility that having making their hours and deciding how much they wanted to drive meant to them. And so we continue to work with our residents about opportunities that they have to enhance their incomes.
Can we have some questions here?
I'm Fez Siddiqui with the Washington Post. This is both for Dara and Mayor Bowser, please. So Mayor Bowser has proposed raising the local tax on Uber's gross receipts to raise money for WMATA. What do you think about, for Dara, what do you think about approaches that turn to Uber and services, ride-hailing services to raise money for mass transit? And Mayor Bowser, how would you explain your approach to companies like Uber and why you see that as necessary?
Well, let me start, if you don't mind, Dara, because
You're the mayor.
I'm going to start. What we should say, and to everybody here, you shouldn't think that our pretty historic funding solutions for dedicated funding for Metro don't rely solely on Uber. In fact, we are raising, and we need to, $175 million so that the region can raise $500 million, which will be leveraged into $1.5 billion a year to make the needed investments in a safe and reliable and growing metro system. So let me start there. So of the $175 million, DC residents and businesses and taxpayers, city administrators here, we looked in our budget and we found $98 million that we could make in our own, from cuts or foregoing other projects in our own budget. So that's 98 of the 175. We had another 25 that we added that we put aside last year to be able to put into Metro. So that's about 125. In the balance, we looked to across the city to a variety of payers to say we have to raise these new revenues. If we don't raise these new revenues, we'll be taking this money away. Excuse me, Susanna. We'll be taking this money away from roads, sidewalks, trees, and alleys. So we had to raise that additional money. So we look to our property owners. So we have recommended a very small increase to our commercial property tax. We look to our visitors, DC residents, restaurant goers, hotel goers, to make a modest increase to our sales tax that will take us up to 6% on sales tax. And then we looked at a increase on our ride-sharing services that have been operating in the city for a number of years that were actually paying less, we thought, than comparable services. And so when you add all of those things together, that is how we are supporting what Metro needs and what the region needs. And the benefits of Metro serve all of us. And so that is the package that we think is the most fair, that hits property owners, it hits visitors, it hits residents, and it hits the ride-sharing services that we think is best for the city.
And all this is not just a Washington conversation; it's happening in New York and a lot of other places.
Yep.
Dart?
I think from our standpoint, listen, we get to operate on the streets of the city. That's a privilege. It's not a right, and we recognize that. And we recognize that enormous investments have to go to repair the roads, and we think that mass transit is a very important part of any city ecosystem. Cities who don't have it, I think, are going to have a problem going forward, and it really gets in the way of growth. So we do see this investment in mass transit as an investment that ultimately, long-term, is going to benefit us as well. And we want to work with the cities, and we want to demonstrate our partnership with the cities in which we operate. I think so. We will be constructive in the dialogue. I think that there are a couple of things that are on our minds as it relates to the specifics of this. One, we want there to be an even playing field, right? It's that we want it to be fair and equitable, and I think we're having discussions about that as it relates to other similar forms of transit. I think it's basic. You want things to be fair. You don't want choices being made because of relationships or political connections, and I'm confident that we will get there, and that's an important part of the dialogue. A second for us actually goes back to what I talked about as far as pool and shared transport, is that to build out shared transport, shared rides, et cetera, requires enormous sustained investment, and it requires cheap prices, technical terms, cheap. Works, okay? And you have to do it when you're introducing a technology early on. You need that. And by the way, shared transport, for example, in these kinds of neighborhoods, the percentage of rides in underserved neighborhoods that are shared on Uber are much, much higher than in other neighborhoods. So it also, these shared transport mechanisms benefit the kinds of neighborhoods that have been historically underserved. And in addition to fairness, what we're sensitive to and what we want to make sure is that you're not taxing one form of shared transportation for another form of shared transportation. We are in this to promote shared transportation in general, promote getting cars off the road, reduce congestion, improve their environment, and we want to make sure that proposals like this are not unconstructive to that goal.
We have time for one more quick question. Let's go right here, Tanya.
Tanya Snyder with Politico. All of this multimodal expansion is coming at a time when there are a lot of questions about Uber's safety culture, especially as it relates to self-driving cars. Two questions. Should we take this as an indication that Uber is kind of shifting focus away from self-driving cars as the central part of its business model? And do you have a more complex understanding now of what it is that happened in the pedestrian fatality a couple weeks ago?
I wouldn't take it as anything having to do with autonomous driving. Autonomous is part of the solution, and I actually think long-term is going to be a very important part of the solution of getting rid of car ownership. And because autonomous will bring down the cost per mile very significantly, will promote sharing, and ultimately will make the world much, much safer from an accident basis, et cetera. So autonomous at maturity will be safer. I can absolutely say that for fact. We are dealing with the tragedy of Tempe, Arizona very seriously, and our actions right now are very much focused on working with the NTSB, working with authorities to give them anything and everything that they want for them to determine exactly what happened, and we don't want to get in front of that. And I think there's a reason why those regulators are there. They are a neutral party. They understand this. They're experienced. They bring a depth of experience there that we don't have. And right now, our total effort is helping them out, and we'll figure out what we do afterwards. But please don't take this as anything as it relates to autonomous. We believe in it, but it's part of a solution. Just like the mayor was talking about, you need metro, you need bus, you need share rides. There's a whole kind of formula for urban transportation. I think what you can take from this is that we're going beyond cars. We are about mobility, making mobility available to everyone everywhere, and being in partnership with cities as it relates to mobility, and that's going to include bikes, and that's going to include buses and subways, et cetera, and we want to be a part of the solution there.
And that's going to have to be a great place to stop, and unfortunately, we could probably talk for 3 more hours. I know the mayor has a hard stop, unfortunately, and we just started to get into a lot of these, but we covered a lot of ground here today, all this around data, social equity, sustainability, regionalism, workforce, funding, financing. So obviously this touches so many different areas of public policy and how cities and the private sector are working together. But I think that's the one clear message that I've heard from the panel today, is that these kinds of partnerships are unique, but they're growing. And what's happening here in the district, and what's happening with Uber, and what's happening around the country is more going to be the norm rather than the exception, I think, in the very, very near future. So please join me in thanking the panel.
Thank you.